All right, we're on. I'm guessing you guys are seeing me. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, I'm a little bit unsure how big the delay is, but let's do this. So, I had the good fortune of getting to work for Procreate a little bit, doing a little promo piece, and now, as a little treat, I'm gonna sit down and paint a character from that piece for you all. So I guess I can show you the piece first. It's here. So a little elf in the forest, you know, kind of thing I like to do. So I figured we could do that. If you guys have questions and stuff, feel free to ask anything really. In the meantime, I'll just get drawing. So, good morning to all, if it's morning for you. For me, it is noon, and it's time to do this. So, I mean, in lieu of questions, I'll be sitting and waiting happily, but in lieu of questions, I can tell you a little bit about myself. If you don't know, my name is Evan. I'm from Norway, a currently snow deplorably lacking country. We had snow the other day, but it rained away before it could even stick to the ground. So, you know, it's going all right. There we go. It is Christmas time, as you know. And for the most part, I've been taking time away from work, though usually I do work for video games and movies and stuff like that. Drawing mostly the stuff you're going to be seeing me draw today. So there's a lot of elves and dwarves and fantasy concepts and things of the sort, which are kind of my forte. So I can talk you through a little bit of the process that I use to do this kind of work. I am a stickler for the large to small problem solving approach. So whenever I start a piece, I'll start fairly zoomed out and not focus on clarity of mark making or rushing to get like the nice oh, Ahmad, thank you very much. Rushing to get like nice details in. If I'm drawing in a sketchbook or drawing with brush pen, I'll be spending more time usually sort of meditating over what I'm going to draw. But since it's digital and I have the freedom to kind of leap in and and sort of rely on my own discipline to not overuse that power, I like to kind of jump in and start establishing large shapes to kind of start creating those relationships of form and angle and intent that I want. So for this character, I want her to feel, kind of upper classy a little. Someone who's not looking down on you so much as like looking down her nose curiously at the world beneath her feet, kind of thing. Benevolent upperclassmanship, like elves are so wont to do. So, the raised head, the chin upraised. We're gonna have to kind of foreshorten the length of the nose to kind of get that idea. Oh, we have a question. When I use the color fill, it leaves a line between my drawing line and color fill. What am I doing wrong? I mean, I don't know the technical aspect of that. What I usually do is draw, like instead of using direct color fill, I'll draw a solid outline, and I'll use the select tool. There we go. Automatic select tool. Oh, I had to use another brush. But it's select the outside and then inverse. That's usually what works for me. I think it has to do with or you could just use the color drop threshold. As I say, I'm not a particularly sort of technically gifted individual, and I'm not particularly fan of the term gifted either, but there are probably quite nice technical solutions to things that I spend a lot of time figuring out practical solution for. So if I was a little bit more willing to read FAQs and a little less hot-headed about figuring things out, things might be easier. But, you know, they are what they are. Federico Moretto is asking, what kind of character do I like to draw? So, it's a very good question, actually. Because it does speak to a quality in characters that I find extremely important. Which is, I'm not really a stickler for one particular kind of character, other than any kind of character that is sort of well thought out and brings a cohesive message. So I know that sounds pretentious, but it's more about why we draw characters, why we tell stories, and what they're for. So I like a character that's built around a concept properly. So it's not just like a champion for the sake of being a champion, or a paladin for the sake of being a paladin, for filling that particular niche. But, you know, a paladin who became a paladin has a story and serves a purpose in a narrative. And I mean, you can mention a bunch of other buzzwords, but essentially there needs to be a good reason, story-wise, for this character to exist. Otherwise, they're just fluff. So I like a well-rounded character with flaws and with things to solve. It makes it also easier to kind of figure out appropriate elements for this character. Like if it's just a demon lord, or as I say, like a champion or a knight or something. These tend to be stereotypical descriptions, and therefore you get stereotypical results. But if you can think out the story and you can think out the background of the character, then suddenly you have something with soul, something with a story to tell, and that makes it easier to tell that story visually. Oh Jesus, there's a lot of questions. Will I be doing workshops in 2020? I will. There's going to be a couple. It's going to be a small one in Rome. There will be one in London. There's going to be one in Berlin at one point. Probably going to... Well, I'll be letting people know on social media and stuff. But yeah, there's going to be more than last year. But less than the years before it's been. I'm going to FCC too, so if you guys are heading there, hope to see as many as possible there. I wasn't there last year, unfortunately, and I missed the place terribly, so it's going to be fun to be back. Oh, this chat is going way too quickly for me to keep up with all the questions, so if I miss one of yours, just repost it and I'll be back to it. I have some question, but I'm 10, about to be 11, and I want to learn how to be a great artist. I have to have the app Procreate, but when I start on a human, I don't finish it because I don't like. So I have to... Okay, dude, that's first and foremost, Kale. I would definitely suggest start with something a little simpler. If you're 10 going on 11 and you're already trying to tackle sort of full human anatomy, then you are way ahead of the curve, and you can slow it down. Like don't burn yourself out on over technicalities. What I would suggest is get a hold of some books by Andrew Loomis, among others. Figure drawing for all it's worth, fun with the pencil, and creative illustration, and treat those as school books essentially. I know that sounds boring, and you don't really want to make drawing into a chore, but I promise you there is magic at the end of this tunnel, and what Loomis will teach you is a lesson more worthy and more important than most others you'll ever learn in drawing, which is to start treating drawing as the use of 2 dimensions to describe 3 dimensions, and he uses very non-abstract language, so it's easy to understand what he's talking about. So I would suggest that sort of learn the technicalities, and on the other hand, have fun. You know, don't necessarily focus on drawing one whole human, but try and like have a goal of something to draw. Like you're gonna draw a cool troll, and then don't be too like harsh on what the result is. Just have fun with it. You know, it's important too. I remember spending way too much time when I was younger, and I mean, I know this is futile advice. I know that if you are so inclined, you will make yourself suffer with stressing over these things, and that's fine too. Don't 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 take this as sort of criticism before the point, but yeah, try not to let it become sort of a stress point, because that is a killer. Oh, I have other people answering questions for me. That's amazing. Does Evan have his own YouTube? No, yeah, as it said elsewhere, I have a Twitch stream that I use, and we've been talking about doing a YouTube stream concurrently. But for now, it's on Twitch. And we also have a Discord and a Patreon that we are running to try and... Essentially what I do on Twitch, just to give myself a little boost, is we do a bunch of assignments, doing character design and world design. And I try to get as much of the audience to come along to do it with me. And have a lot of fun creating characters and talking through process and stuff like that. So if that sounds like it might be appealing, then feel free to come along. It is good fun. I'm using the most basic round brush you can possibly get, and I'm using the Nico roll, to which I've added a little bit of color dynamic, which is one of the new features with the latest update from Procreate. And I gotta say, it is a lifesaver. I've been waiting for this update for, well, since I started using Procreate, and it is so freeing, so thoroughly satisfying to be able to add color dynamics to brushes and just like color my life away. It makes me very happy. So thank you, Procreate. I'm going a little aimlessly on this face. I'm just trying to sort of noodle my way through it, but it might not be the most useful way of going about it, though it does give me the option of sort of changing and thinking, and that's nice. I'm no artist, but I'm trying to improve. What I've learned is learn the fundamentals of drawing, and then there are no rules, really. Draw whatever you... Yeah, Lawrence, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's like building things. It's like being... I think of it as engineering, but that's probably because my parents and my sister are engineers, but the more things you know, the more rules of construction, the more rules of anything, really, you know. The more tools you have, and therefore the more interesting things you can make. I think that's kind of the idea. Okay. Oh, Lawrence. Yeah. So about background color. This is a little sort of move I usually do because of the Twitch stream. There's something in the stream algorithm that bleaches out white, so it becomes kind of painful for my viewers to watch. So I just slap on a background color usually. But I also find that when I'm sketching, doing so on not a white surface is a very nice way of avoiding kind of blank brain syndrome. You know, like... A big problem a lot of artists have is to kind of jump into a drawing. Problem of it being that you end up not really knowing what to draw. Like you don't spend a lot of time on the front end, kind of getting an idea, and so you jump in and you just start drawing something, and at the end of it, you're kind of feeling like you didn't really complete something because you end up with something you're not happy with. And this is a mixture of things. For me, it's a lot that I compare myself to people that are objectively more skillful than me, and I want to draw like they do, but I can't in many ways. Like if I spent a lot of like Elisa Ivanova, for example, is a good example of someone who's just like a fantastic drafts person. And if I look too much at her drawings and then I go to draw, I'll be sitting there like just angry with myself because I'm not able to like make these beautiful marks that I want to make. So that kind of thing can be frustrating. But so I think one thing that I'm a big proponent of is sort of pre-planning, the 7 P's. Prior planning and prior planning and preparation prevents poor performance. I hope I can say that here. And it literally just means that, well, it means what it says. It's, you know, if you take the time to plan out ahead of time, there's less that can go wrong as you're going through the difficult task of actually drawing things. So, plan ahead. The brush I'm using. Oh, I don't have enough money to buy an iPad, but would you agree with the fact that I can be a good digital artist even? Yeah, Mertanjay. Yeah, absolutely. You don't need. I mean, no particular tool is going to make you better. Though I will say that some digital tools will take a lot of frustration away from you, which is nice. But yeah, no, I mean, traditional skills transfer very easily to digital, I find. But you have to, at least for me, like it only works when it's traditional skills I've gained through technical application. Like I can't. I've tried to get good at using like digital brushes, like ink brushes and brush things that emulate sort of brush factors, and I can't do it. It doesn't make any sense for me. So I get frustrated, and they take away the joy that like I love using brush pens in real life, for example, but things that emulate that kind of effect in digital make very little use for me. I use them for for blurring and stuff like that, but not really for drawing. I know some people can do it, and I'm sure like with training I could do it too, but it's just never been an imperative for me. So yeah, some technical skills do carry over, but sooner or later, it's good to get your hands on the actual thing and to get to play around with it. Evan, is this your full-time job? You hear a lot about starving artists. Yeah, concept design, pre-production, this sort of thing is my full-time job. There are actually, like, when I started out, like 10 years ago. Oh god, I'm old. Yeah, the market for this, especially in Norway, was much smaller. And oh goodness, if we just had Procreate back then, but we didn't. But I had the good fortune of having having a friend who called a meeting, invited a bunch of Norwegian illustrators to a sort of meetup a couple of weeks back, and suddenly you find, you know, like there's a ton more of us, and they're all doing this full time now. So, and Norway is not a particularly cheap country to live in. So if you can make it in Norway, there's no way you can't do this elsewhere too. And I think, you know, like a bunch of people were just doing, like had web shops they were working through, or were working for small companies. So yeah, I get that question quite a bit actually. Like the viability of a career in sort of concept art and illustration and fantasy. And I would just say, like, I don't think there's ever been a better time to do this than right now, in terms of what there is out there in terms of work, how many clients there are, how many projects there are. Like, just look at things like The Witcher, which is a testament to the popularity of fantasy as a genre right now. And you know, I have certain issues with that series, but I do adore that it exists. I love that we are in a time and a place now where that is something that gets the kind of attention and the kind of budget that it does. If you go back 20 years, the closest equivalent we had, well, before Lord of the Rings was like the Xena Warrior Princess and Conan the Barbarian. So it's good to see, that the industry is growing forwards and upwards. So I flip canvas by using the quick menu. So you can set that up in here, and then under preferences you go into gesture controls and you can set it up there. And then so when I click the screen, I get this menu up, and then I can swipe to the icon that I want. But I don't actually have to click twice. I just click and swipe, and the menu comes up, and I have my flip ready. So this is one of those things that I'm really, really big fan of with Procreate, and one of those things that once you're used to it, you can't imagine going away from it, and you start like finding yourself tapping and swiping on your sketchbooks and on canvases you're painting on and stuff like that. And it's like, it's like when you first fell in love with Photoshop and you started Control Alt deleting everything, no, Control Alt Zing everything. The factor that kind of takes this one step further is that it's a gesture. It's not even like button clicks. It's just, yeah, as I say, it's a gesture. It's infuriatingly simple to do, and once you kind of get used to that as a gesture, you start looking for other simple things that they've done, and it's all over the place. I don't want to come off as like too much of a fanboy, though I am a huge fanboy of Procreate, but yeah, there's a certain sense of brilliance to that. And it's not like gesture control hasn't been around for a long time, it's just nobody's really used it like that. Can you activate the option for seeing the brush on the screen? Yeah, I can. I think I have it on. Yeah, brush cursor is on. It's just I'm using a small brush, so you'll have to just excuse me. I'll try and work a little more aggressively so it's easier to see. I do realize that I go about fiddling with shapes a little too early in the process anyway, so it's good that you call it out. I don't want to make this boring for anybody. I'm living in India and want to work for AAA games, specifically for Ubisoft and like Assassin's Creed. Ain't lying, promise. I really work smart and hard, but still not getting weight to get there. Yeah. So working for having worked for Ubisoft a little bit. I'm not gonna tell you what projects because that would be unethical, but I can only say that they are a pretty fair client, and they're good at like scouting for talent. So very good way of sort of building a online presence that they might pay attention to or find. I mean, the biggest issue here is to be found, kind of. You can always start sending them portfolios and continuous updates. That was my approach to try and get work for Wizards of the Coast. I sent them continuous emails for like, yeah, 2.5 years, and got the. I mean, they have the most polite email replies, but you can't help but feel like, after you get your 12th or 13th, like, hey, we have your work on file. We'll get back to. We'll contact you if there's anything. After a sufficient amount of those, you kind of start losing the energy a little, and so you'll find that the industry is a lot about contact. So as much as like making a strong portfolio, it's also important to make sure that portfolio comes in front of the right people. So going to conventions, going to workshops, or contacting them directly, like sleuthing a little bit and finding a contact person within there who can be kind of your champion. That's also a very viable route. About finding your art style, I don't really. So okay, so there, I'm not don't want to like pull down on that or on that idea. It's not like the idea of an art style is wrong. Everyone has it, but finding it'll find you. It's fine. It's better that you focus on your craft and let the style kind of come to you. A style is just your way of abstracting and organizing the world for ease of and consistency of mark making and therefore expression. So that it's not really something you have to find. You have to find what motivates you, what is important to your mark making. And once you have that, the rest will kind of fall in line. So my hint for finding your style or having your style find you is to consistently work on things in your field of interest that that challenge you and that sort of says something about what you want to express, and kind of go for that rather than focusing on like finding a particular style. The problem with going at it as a thing to be found is that you'll start looking, and the problem there is that you'll find it. You'll find other people's styles, and you'll see that as a viable option, and that's when we sort of subconsciously start kind of importing the art of other people as inspiration, and we make ourselves kind of less exciting copies of more accomplished artists, and it's something that I don't think. I mean, most of the time when you see it, I don't think it's purposeful. I don't think it's something people mean to do, but it is something that they end up doing, and I think it's something that's worth trying to avoid. Just because you want your art to be an expression of you, of something that you enjoy, of things that are important to you, and things that you want to say, and ending up sort of reflecting the expressions of others is anathema to that. How old is Evan? I'm just curious. Evan is 31 years old. That is, oh god, getting up there. But I have a cat now, so I'll live forever. I'm gonna get her to teach me the ways of the 9 lives, and then I can live forever. The size of the canvas is A4 with 300 dpi. It's my standard work file. My friend Spiridon says I should be working larger, and I probably should be, but when I start a new file sometimes, or a lot of time, I'll forget that and then come back to it later and be like, oops, I should resize. And I find it to be pretty good. Like, it also prevents me from getting too sucked into sort of detail land and kind of just remaining in an area of the painting that, like, if I can do detail, I'm so tempted to do detail, So it's good to kind of have these structural borders that don't allow you to do certain things. I think that actually pays into the whole finding your style thing too, or at least sort of discovering the great usefulness of limits. So, especially when you start in digital media for the first time, and you kind of find like all the options, all the things you can do, and automatically, because we're not inclined to limitations, we want to do everything, and so you can see a lot of early sort of digital art is kind of blown out in all kinds of directions, values in color, like there's no limits, so we impose none. But you see the absolute best of digital art, or art in general, is stuff that does a lot with very little, and I think that's central to doing good and interesting stuff, is to sort of place your limits so that you can subconsciously invite your audience to judge by those limits and not by like the plethora of things that are possible. How often do you use reference? So I use reference all the time for studies. I'll go and do, like, if I'm starting a piece, I'll be spending the whole thumbnail process and the sketching process looking for things that I don't know how to do, and I'll give it a try, just to see if I can kind of come up with a simulacrum of the things that I want. But I'm very critical about those things, and if there's something that I feel like whatever I put down doesn't actually represent the thing that I want, I'll go and find reference, I'll go and do studies, and then I'll try and use those studies actively to inform my sort of next iteration of the thing that I'm trying to draw. So, for example, vehicles is a notorious weak spot of mine. I'm terrible at them. Mostly because I can't help but see them as like creatures or characters. And so I tend to get like, inaccurate with them. And so oftentimes if I'm working on something more sci-fi that I do for work, for example, I usually have to go back and like sit down for an hour or two and do a study of the thing that I'm trying to put into the piece, and then come back and do it again. Essentially because I have to relearn the sort of more technical way of drawing something like that. Set, yes, it is a grower. So I have, for those of you who are kind of new to my whole shtick, I have been kind of playing with this fantasy universe of mine for a while, and it's not nothing revolutionary, but it is kind of my take on a bunch of classical fantasy elements. And one of them is the idea of like the wood elves and how the interaction between wood and elf actually works. And so I have this idea of these semi-sentient tumors almost that kind of grow inside the elves and look like roots and stuff. And so I call them growers, these some symbiotic beings. And they can be, so they're supposed to be existing in the realm between the creepy and the beautiful, which I think gives them a nice little emphasis. At what age did you start working in the industry? I had my first job, like freelance jobs, when I was 18. I was still in art school at the time, and was doing my first few little, I think it was for White Wolf or something back then. Not to spend the time here casting shade, but yeah, I never got paid for that one. And then when I moved to England to attend the University College Falmouth, I did some work for another small company, Anthropos Gaming, who are a fantastic company to work for. And they allowed me to do like little characters. So between 18 and 19 was when I had like my first steady jobs. My first industry job per se, like at a studio, was when I was 21, I believe. No, 20. And I realized that University College Falmouth was a little too expensive for me, and was not really teaching me the things that I wanted to learn. Or rather, they didn't have it on the curriculum. I might have checked before, but I didn't. So I got to go to Canada, to Quebec, and work for this fantastic company called Volta. Where I got to work with some legends like Ruan Jia and Yun Ling and Fred Rambo and Arnaud Feu and Sundar Raj. Those guys were fantastic, and I learned a ton. I think that's, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I don't know if it would work for everybody, but if you have a chance to go work at an outsourcing studio, and if they have some solid names on the roster, and you can see in their portfolio that they do some quality work, I would definitely suggest doing it, because it is a great way of killing your ego artistically, or at least beating it down pretty good. I think it's one of those things that we all need to do as artists, is to get over this idea of preciousness. I mean, it's always going to be there, but you have to learn how to disregard it a little bit, and trust in your learning, and trust in the techniques that you've started using, and your own ability to call a halt, and take new direction if needed. But yeah, it was a huge wake-up call for me to go work there, especially with Arnaud Feu, who very few people know about. I think he is not particularly big on the whole self-marketing thing, but if you can find him, I'll write his name in the chat. He's still one of my favorite artists. Any comments over experience versus talent in favor of working in good studios? Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe talent exists. I mean, I've never met a person who has ever called themselves talented in any way that they could defend. And I've never met anybody who, when calling someone else talented, could actually, substantiate what that meant. It's just another word for good. And it's like the word gifted. We think of this as a compliment. Though, I mean, I would argue that it's not. That it is an insult. Well, not an insult. That would be overly dramatic. But it's a disregard to the hard work and to the passion and the vocational just sacrifice that you have to do to get to a point where you can do this day in, day out. So hard work will show in your portfolio if you're working hard and working towards a consistent goal. So working hard in just doing stuff every day, that's good, but it can also end up with nothing. So you have to make sure that what you're doing actually works towards a consistent goal that you have set. But yeah, no, I'll take hard work any day. People who are previously skilled, who will come to certain things with pre-existing skills, often either kind of came by those skills subconsciously, so through just like repetition, and yeah, that's good, but that doesn't really speak to whether or not they're going to be a good team player or if they're going to be a good project worker. I'll take a hard worker any day. So if you can show hard work, I think you'll get a lot further. Do you think going to art school is important for learning and creating connections? I think it's very useful. I went to art school and I had the good fortune of doing it in Norway, which means I didn't really have to deal with a lot of heavy tuitions, and it didn't really put me into debt. So that was sort of lucky. I think there's a lot to be said for art school, but I think the prohibitive price that it tends to have in certain places is, as I say, prohibitive. It kind of robs it of its efficacy by by virtue of its very sort of building blocks. So I don't think there's one particular answer to that. I think certain art schools are more worthwhile than others, especially if you want to get into design and if you want to get into like video game stuff. In Europe, I know there's a bunch of good ones. The one that I'm comfortable sort of suggesting is the Danish school called the Animation Workshop. And I know that's a weird name for a school that also teaches like concept art and stuff. They started as an animation school, and then that is their principal sort of geschäft. But they're also a fantastic place for learning sort of concept design and design development. So, yeah, but there are other schools like that too. The Gobelin school in France, for example, is good, though apparently quite expensive. Is the sound only on one channel? I think so. I've never really. I've tried to get OBS to record multiple channels, but it doesn't do that. What do you do when you're in a bad mood for days? Oh, I go jogging. I get out of my own head as best as I can. I read. I also try to kind of analyze why I'm angry. Like if I'm in a bad mood, it's never for no reason whatsoever. So if it's something that I need to do, if it's someone who I'm having a fight with, if it's something that's ruining my life, like the last season of Game of Thrones, then I have to settle that with myself. I have to get to a point where I can get over it, get past it, and move on in the most constructive way I can. But I also think it's important to kind of recognize that we're feeling the way we're feeling, and not punish. Like I don't want to punish myself for feeling bad. So finding healthy ways to kind of exercise the frustration or pain that I might be feeling, I think is good. So I go climbing a lot too, and those are good combinations. Jogging, climbing, things that generally exhaust my own frustrations, I find to be good. And then, if I can, I'll want to get back to getting along with whoever I'm not getting along with at the time. Do you prefer building values first, or do you start first laying colors? I usually start with colors, but I'm down for testing things. Let's try some. Well, we can try doing them both, I guess. But okay, we have a pretty decent design here, so I'm gonna start smacking in some colors. I'm gonna try to keep this pretty subtle. I'm not gonna go too crazy with the colors, but I'm gonna do some fun things. Someone mentioned something. The artist friends I have went to the animation works and I only heard good things about it. Yeah, that I think is like the thing that ensures me that it is a worthwhile place to go. Is I've never heard anyone actually say a bad thing about it. People call it, it is a competitive place, but it is also very compassionate about that competitive nature. People who have been there have usually also had their minds changed about what being competitive is, and it is a place that teaches you, the fun of competing and cooperating at the same time. So if I had known back in the day when I was looking that this place existed, I might have ended up there. And if they'll have me, I would love to go there to teach, because it does sound like an amazingly inspiring place. But I know a plethora of people who've studied there and who've since worked with people who come out of there, and it seems like a very solid institution. What do you do when facing an art block? Do you suggest drawing anyway, like studies, or taking a break and doing completely different things? Well, I don't think... I mean, both of those things are excellent suggestions, essentially. If you're having an art block, tends to be that the art block is a manifestation of you wanting or trying to express something that you simply don't know how to express. So my personal kind of go-to is to try and work my way through it. I'll try and build the sketch that I want to build, and if I get to a point where I just can't do it, I'll just quite simply take down the thing that I don't know how to do. I'll find study material, or if it's something more subtle, like something that I need to research, I'll find the research, and then kind of work from there. I'm a simple person. I just like to, I'm quite pragmatic when it comes to kind of solving these kinds of problems. So I like a simple solution. So find my reference, go study it, take away a lesson, try and apply that lesson to the next sketch and see if it helps. And if it doesn't, then I have to sit back down and try and figure out what that didn't work. I was talking about the animation workshop. Do you suggest only focused thing in a concept art portfolio, or can we add different styles? For example, my portfolio would be only based on environment, but can we include different environment styles? Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great idea. Essentially, your portfolio is, let's call it a flirtatious love letter to your prospective client or employer, where you're showing them what kind of problems you can solve for them. So when people ask sort of like, should I tailor my portfolio to a particular client, I usually say no. I think you should tailor it to showing what you can do for any client. And if there's a client with a very obvious need for one particular thing, then yeah, I mean, that's an easy fix, is to show your ability to fix those problems specifically. But more to the point, I think it's important to just, you know, give an honest impression of your abilities as an artist. Because in the end, that's what you are. When you're doing concept art, you are Mr. Fix It. You are, they give you a problem, and you have to give a solution to that problem that ticks a bunch of boxes, one of which is being, well, not too obvious, I guess, and your ability to create a, like, you'll be given some weird and pretty nuts assignments sometimes, and when they don't make sense conceptually, your job is to still make these weird things look good, and that can be a hard thing to do, but that's your job. So if you want to be a traveling Mr. Fix-It, for example, then show that you can make the most insane stuff look good, right? That's the way to do it. Or if you want to do, like, my portfolio, for example, is structured a lot around the things that I like to do, which is sort of the appropriation of historical factoids into fantasy. I'm a big fan of history. I read a lot of history, and I write my own little histories, and I try to kind of bind my fantasy in not specific historical elements, but rather an understanding of how historical things came to be the way they are. And so using the same logical building blocks, I'll try to build sort of the fantasy equivalents of those things. I very much agree, Louise. It is a fantastic app, and I do use it pretty much every day. Except if I'm having a super lazy day where all I'm doing is like sleeping all day or lying around and watching Netflix. Sometimes this happens when you're on vacation, and those are lovely days. Okay, so I'm gonna do just a little tricky trick using color balance. I'm just gonna add a little bit of extra color to the line art so it'll meld in easier with the rest of the color scheme when it comes that far. I don't want to do too much, but I want it to just feel more like a variant of color rather than black on colored black background. Alright, so now we can do some colors. So I'm going to use that layer 3 as a base layer, add a clipping mask on top, and then we'll paint in as we go. You should get in contact with the the animation work. Don't doubt they would like to have you come teach. Yeah, I was in contact with them a while back, and then we had a plan that I should come and teach, but unfortunately it came down to a choice between going there or going to see my now wife. So that was no real choice, and I'm afraid that kind of rubbed them the wrong way, which is understandable. It was something I should have planned better, but when push comes to shove, I know where my priorities lie. So hopefully they'll forgive me one day and have me back. But until then, I'll just keep keep pimping them, because they are a great school. How do I get through the sketch phase to do more refined drawing? Well, it depends on what you're doing in your sketch phase, Gustav. So when you're sketching, essentially what you're doing is you're setting down a foundation for everything else that goes on top, and that's where most of your work is done. When you hear the phrase "learn to love the process," it's essentially learn to love sketching, because that's where so much of this is done. So how do you get through that? You get to a point where you can put down the information that makes the rest of the drawing fun or interesting to do. That I think is very key. So it's hard to answer that question directly, because it's kind of wide spanning, but yeah, try and see the whole piece as a continuum, and that it's not, you don't do one thing in order to do another thing. You do one thing as a vehicle to the final read. So, for example, I try to avoid rendering as much as possible by spending a lot of time on my different layers, on my flat colors on my shading layers and so on, trying to get as accurate and as to the point as I can be. Because by doing that, I cut down on the actual rendering time I have to do at the end. And usually, what ends up happening is that my product looks cleaner if the constituent elements building into it are more cleanly put down. How much does reading influence your work? It's important for an artist to read a lot. I think so. And just for so I think it's very important, especially for concept art, because you do, again, like, we spend a lot of our time as concept artists trying to solve problems for other people, and especially when most of those problems exist inside of a popular cultural zeitgeist, it's important to have, an idea of the elements that build that zeitgeist, that set of ideas. So personally, for example, if someone asked me to do Frankenstein, now, because now I've read Frankenstein, which I feel like because it is such a cultural cornerstone, we should have read that in school, but we didn't. But that's a very different book. So now, if someone asked me to do Frankenstein, out of the interest of the source material, I could ask a bunch of questions about, what kind of angling are we doing, and what is important for this read of Frankenstein that we want to do. So I believe reading is an extremely important tool for concept art. I have a question. I'm currently using Procreate 5, so I'm using software 13. I can seem to download my drawing. So transparent PNGs. Okay, I wish I could answer that one, Natasha, but I have no idea of the technical stuff, so I think that's a question for Georgie. Oh, she's already answered. Sorry. Reading is important, period. You should read not just... It will help you art in the sense that it could help you apply stories to your pictures, but it makes you smarter. Yeah, I believe there's something to that, Joshua. What are your favorite art books? My favorite art book of all time. I can't get enough of it, and I have had it for a number of years and still haven't kind of found anything better. Is the Out of the Forest, which is the art book of Paul Bonner. I'm a big fan of it, and I'm a big fan of his work and his art and the way he approaches picture making and storytelling. And yeah, that one's my favorite. I have a bunch of favorites. Apart from my own, I can suggest the Jesper Eising's Elsewhere, which is great, and I have the Master's Guide to Alphonse Mucha, which is an endless source of inspiration and happiness. What else do I have sitting on the shelf? We just ordered a bunch of the Art of Ghibli movies, and those are fantastic. We have, we have House Moving Castle already. Or no, we don't have House Moving. We have one of them. I think it is House Moving Castle. We have one of them, and we just ordered like a bunch more, and they're fantastic too. It's such a great source of both information but also inspiration. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Out of the Forest. Now to sketching and wondering why you lay down a foundation color and then add color on top. Love your drawing. Thanks. Rachel, it's for the ease of my own eyes, essentially. I use the base color as... So when from studies and stuff that I've done of forests, this kind of background color is quite useful for kind of the mood and the kind of foliage I'm going for this character. So it's just something to bounce other colors off of. It's not supposed to represent anything other than a base layer. So it's very tempting when you do these kinds of things to kind of go, oh, branches, they're brown, and leaves, they are green. And having done, especially for the piece that I did for Procreate, I did a bunch of tree studies and kind of looked into that. And it's fun to see that, that entire kind of knowledge is entirely incorrect, and that trees have so many colors, like just bark and different kinds of tree pulp and stuff like that. It has a myriad of colors. So what I'm thinking about when I'm laying down the first color is just something to pull things towards a willing center, and then all the other colors are sort of things popping up from that, and I'm trying to build a sense of contrast to kind of lead you to see the things that I want to show you, and to kind of lead the eye away from stuff that I'm not that interested in showing off. Oh, dang. Okay, I fell behind again. I've heard... Oh, wait. New sketching. Okay. I was expecting you to mention hardcover. Yeah, hardcover is cool. It's a project by a bunch of artists, but under the sort of idea of Spiridon Genakis to do an art book to challenge sort of online censorship rules and sort of the culture of sexual censorship that we have. And so it's a bit of a porny book, but it's good, and it's fun to see how dirty people get when they have a license for it. So I would suggest, if you don't know it, it's a worthwhile read, and it's worth checking out. It's a pretty great project. I've heard you say that you usually not use reference. You study the subject until you no longer need the reference to make pictures of it. Would you like to know how you process on that? Okay, so the process on that is kind of what I went through before. That I'll rely on my mental library up until the point where it is no longer reliable, essentially. I try to approach any issue with an idea, and I try it out, and I can pretty quickly see if I have a plan moving forward, if I know what to do, if I can figure that out. And then sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's too foreign or something, or my knowledge is just not up to snuff. And then I have to take a step back, and I go and find some applicable source material, and I do some studies aimed at, not like, this is important about studies, is they're not there for you to make a pretty image. They're there for you to learn something. So I do studies in order to pick up bits of information that I need for the piece, and then I'll move on. So my studies are pretty rough and tumble things. They're not usually very pretty. But it is a very useful way of working, because it does mean that you attain very specific information that you need, and then you can move on without having to sort of dwell on making them pretty. And in doing them in conjunction with the piece means that I can take away that feeling of like studying something and then forgetting it like the next minute, which is often a big problem for me. So you'll do some studies, and then you'll totally forget by the time that you want to use that information. So I'll try and apply it as quickly and as efficaciously as possible. Like, literally, if you want to study someone, Paul Bonner is perfect. A master. Every stroke describes something. There's no mislaid info. I mean, Paul is fantastic, no doubt about it. But I would say, don't study Paul. Don't study anybody. Study. I mean, if you wanna learn about like detail orientation and narrative composition, then you could do a lot worse than Paul. But I hesitate to accept that any artist is kind of perfect. There are there are things about Paul's work that is also has issues. Like his compositions can be a little confusing, and there are definitely. Oops, did I pin the wrong way? No, I didn't. Whew. Wait, what? Oh, bugger. I did pin it the wrong way. Okay. Let's see if we can take that back. There we go. Whew. Good. But yeah, I would suggest studying nature. It is a because okay, so when we're studying, we're trying to figure things out. We're trying to learn things, and so if we are studying specifically from Paul Bonner, then you'll learn all the things that Paul Bonner has done that aren't necessarily right, as well, and you won't be in a position to claim whether or not it is right or wrong. So I would suggest study Paul Bonner as an alternative to as an alternative of problem solving, and then sort of apply and discard as you see fit. I want to do more studies, but I'm having trouble finding artists. Any suggestions? Are there any online communities other than DeviantArt, Instagram, Behance? Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a bunch. I know there's a lot of different places on Facebook that you can go. There are some forums out there. Personally, I have, or we're running a Discord channel thing through the Patreon, where we're building a little artists community, which is all about learning things like that. There's forums like Permanoob, that's quite useful. So yeah, there's all kinds of places, but yeah, it ain't like back in the day where you could like have concept.org and stuff. Man, those were the days. But yeah, no, don't despair. There are places out there to find fellow artists who can help and inspire and do things. I think actually like the prevalence and availability of these kinds of places and these kinds of people is greater now than ever before too. So it's a good time to be in the industry. When Google hardcover, I get original. When I Google hardcover, I get the origin of hardback binding. You have to search for our just hardcover art book, I guess, and you'll probably find it, or Kickstarter, or something. Thanks for answering my question so far. I just want to ask, I really want to work for the Coast. Any tips you can give to better my chance? Oh yeah, so my actually getting to work for them had nothing to do with me sending them all those portfolio emails, or rather that became like an afterthought, and became kind of the last convincer. But it had to do with me moving to Denmark after having been in California, and getting to share a studio with Jesper Eising. And he has been working for Magic the Gathering for years. And so he kind of offhandedly, he needed to pass on a card, and he kind of offhandedly asked me if I wanted to do some Magic cards. I was like, yes, please. So they have a hiring or a sort of take-in policy of hiring mostly people who they already know, or who have come as suggested by another artist that they're already working with. And this is to kind of avoid sloppy freelancers and people who don't deliver on time, that kind of thing. Because if you come in by the recommendation of someone else, then you feel obligated to deliver on time and like do the job properly, which I think in the end is probably a good thing. So And but they also view portfolios at sorry, I mixed in some Norwegian there, at different venues throughout the year. So if you can find one where they are, bring your portfolio, and that's a good place to get their attention too. If you know someone who works for them, you can ask them to kind of recommend you once they find that you are in a are of sufficient sort of skill. But yeah, it's they're a bit of a difficult client to kind of get to, but once you're there, and it's not impossible. Take my word for that. It's just it's tenacity, and it's willingness to keep hustling, I guess. Everyone can ask a question, Jared. Evan, are you using a matte screen protector? I'm not on this one actually. The new model iPad has a different surface treatment than the old one. So the old one had the reason why a surface screen protector was necessary in the old ones was that it had this sort of oily feel to the glass, and it was just uncomfortable to draw on. This new one is slightly different, and so I'm less in need of texture layer. So I haven't gotten one yet. I've barely even taken the iPad out of the house because I haven't gotten a cover for it yet. I'm a creature comfort kind of guy. So no, not really, but I should. Alright, so I'm noticing that the colors on my screen is very different from that of the screen on which I'm watching the YouTube playback. So I'm a little bit off put by that, but just a little. Ooh, more questions. Have you ever created a piece that good you're afraid to publish it and people would steal your idea? Or is the reason why an artist can't publish? There's a lot of questions of those kinds of things, like how do you avoid people stealing your pieces and whatnot. Personally, I've never really felt that it was a huge issue. I see quite often people either copying or using elements of my pieces in their own work, and I'm quite okay with that. I don't think it's a good thing, but I feel like if people need to do that, if they're in such dire straits that's where they gotta go, then they have bigger problems than me being pissy with them. So I'm not gonna waste my time on that. I've never lost anything from people copying me, so it doesn't really bother me. Let them if they must, But I have the good luck of having separate realms of personal and private work. So perhaps if my private work was more kind of the way that I earned money, it would be a bigger problem for me. And I'm not saying that I'm okay with people stealing stuff, but I don't really have a good answer to the question. I'm a little blasé when it comes to it. But I know you can use watermarking and a lot of stuff like that. But in the end, people are gonna steal stuff. So you can either kind of spend energy on trying to take that away, or you can trust the fact that if people are stealing your stuff, that probably means that it's of good enough quality that you can always make more. And most of my stuff is fairly sketchy anyway, so it ain't that hard for me to make more of it. I do realize that these are not particularly good reasons, but they are mine. So that's what that is. Do you have Do you have an update on the next challenge? I was gonna check on that today, but so I'm gonna assume either you're talking about something to do with Procure, which I'm not gonna be able to answer. But if you're talking about the assignments for the Twitch channel, then I believe we are about to close the polls, or we have already done so, and the next assignment will be announced, I believe, tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to getting started on that. Okay, Kai is saying, since you and your wife are both great artists, I was curious to know, how did you meet? Oh, this is a cute story. This is such a cute story that it makes me a little angry. So we met at a schoolism event in 2016, and I, I I'm always a little embarrassed to sort of try and explain how it was, because it makes me feel like I'm sounding like Justin Bieber or something. But it was one of those like, oh, we met, and I immediately realized that like, oh, so that's the person I like. Cool. And we both came from very different places, and we were different sort of places in our lives at the time, so we had to kind of figure out ways to see each other. So we met in Dubai at the workshop, and then we made a plan to meet up in Turkey, and we did. And then we went for almost another 2 years of traveling together, and going to different places, spending time together, getting to know each other, having adventures together. And then at some point, somehow, I managed to convince her that moving to cold, harsh, and sometimes uninviting Norway was a great idea. So she did, and she was willing to go through all of the unpleasantness of visa application and moving and all that. So she is a champion in my life, and she does so much. But yeah, so that's how we met, and how how we stuck it out. Oh, Hassan, you guys were cute. Ah, stop it, you. I've been looking at colleges. Do you know if Otis College of Art and Design is a good choice? I ask because I want to make sure after I graduate I won't be employers to judge me for my college. I don't know what Otis is, so I can't really comment on that. I can tell you that I've never. I mean, I don't have a higher degree. I don't even have a bachelor's, and that has never cost me a job. There's never been a situation in which I've been considered for a job or been declined for a job for not having a bachelor's degree. In this industry, in my experience, it comes down to the portfolio and little else. So, yeah, I'm not overly concerned nor interested of colleges really. And I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, because it's such a young industry. Oh, okay. Such a young industry, and such a young discipline, that how do you quantify concept art as a bachelor's degree? For that reason, how do you quantify illustration as a bachelor's degree? I'm still baffled, but yeah, that's the way it is. Mm, 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 mm. Probably I'm blushing a little. I do get a little hot in the cheeks when I talk about her. Alright. All right. Looks like I'm running out of questions. So if someone's been missed out, please repost your question in the chat. This usually is the time of the process where where oh, Lucius, that was good. Where the chat starts taking over by itself and they start controlling the conversation, and I kind of fade out and go into my drawing. So right now I'm gonna do a second color pass. That means I'm adding little secondary nudges to each kind of color flat to try and give it a little more interest. Like if you look in nature, you'll see that no surface is uniform. There is so many like different things. Oh, YouTube. So at this stage is an excellent place to sort of add these elements in for a sense of interest, for a sense of drama, that sort of thing. And this is where, having done some studies of nature and of wood and leaves and these kinds of things, comes in handy, because it's not that I can remember every study, but it's that it gives you a sense of what you can play with and where the rules are. Oh, and we got more questions. Nowadays, creative companies focus more on your skills and portfolio instead of certifications. I mean, Steve Jobs. That's true, though. I hesitate to use Steve Jobs as a model for anything, because the guy also went on some pretty weird dietary binges, and it's entirely possible that that's killed him. So, you know, a little careful with Mr. Jobs, I guess. Well, it can't be applied to all industries. It's just that the entertainment is so different and subject to a lot of changes all the time. It is difficult even creating curriculum for it. Yeah, exactly. And especially for something as varied as concept design. Because literally what you're trying to do is to reach into a creator's head and pick out what they thought was interesting or worthwhile. And that's why we come back to reading. Right? Like, communication is what we're doing here. Apart from making pretty pictures. So being able to share a sense of zeitgeist and a sense of understanding of how to read a story, how to read certain elements of stories, is vital. So, if you can share a writer with someone, if you can share, be it Pratchett or Tolstoy or Tolkien or Lewis or Asimov, if you both read Asimov, you know a little something about how to look at future empires and spacefaring and these kinds of things. In the same way that if you read Herbert's Dune, you'll know some things about how to treat, small versus large and spacefaring feudalism and that kind of thing. Like, these can be very useful pointing pens. Thank you very much, Jethro. Hello to South Africa. Oh, I want to go to South Africa. My parents went there a little while ago and were crazy about the place. Absolutely loved it. So, as I understand it, you gotta get me down there. Ever thought of putting up your book list? Uh, when you say book list, you mean like list of books I like or list of books I've made? Because if it's list of books I like, it's gonna be sort of subject to changes all the time. Do you think work with Procreate makes an artist look beginner instead of Photoshop? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if I thought so, I don't think I would be using it the way I do. Because like Procreate is my main work tool now. It's the tool with which I do most of my work. So for me, it feels, if anything, more professional than a lot of the stuff I see coming out of Photoshop. Um, Mostly because when I see people kind of going into using Procreate as their main tool to kind of change this to darken, it means that things are going to melt into the colors as I start applying them. Um, yeah, when I see people using Procreate for the most part, I know that or I can assume that they're relying more on more basic skills, and usually this results in clearer output. So yeah, no, personally, I don't have that experience with Procreate, but there might be others who disagree. I mean, in the beginning, it was harder to do fully fledged professional work with it, mostly because it was lacking certain tools like color dynamic, which is, for me at least, very useful because um, my eyes or my way of seeing color is very value based. I come from drawing much more than painting, and so mixing colors is I like I like an oil based approach better than say a watercolor approach. So I like to mix things on the palette. I like to squish things around. I don't like doing things too cleanly when it comes to color, but I like to clean up after myself afterwards. So for that, Procreate is perfect. Mm, 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 Hey, Silva. Sup? Yeah, sure. I haven't really thought of putting up a list particularly of books in a particular place, but it could be a good idea. Um, One book I read recently, or relatively recently, which was a slog of a book, but god damn it if it wasn't worth it, was Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And it is the most, pardon the expression, and I'm sorry if this gets us in trouble with the YouTube stuffs, but it's the most fucky book I've read in such a long time. It is truly writing from a man who likes to play around with the idea of what an audience is, and how much can you throw at them before you throw up your hands as an audience member and just go like, what the hell? Why? Uh, it's like, if you read Song of Ice and Fire, it's like when you come to the Red Wedding and things don't go the way you wanted them to go, and you're just looking for like ways that he can possibly save save the characters you want, and there's just like no way. That's Gene Wolfe, but like all the time. Yeah, I mean, if Gaston Garcia is asking how to bring more life into his colors, it feels like they're a little flat and a little boring. I would say do some studies of the color harmonies. Try and find harmonies and juxtapositions of colors that makes you happy or describes a certain mood that you want to reproduce in your painting, and go from there. For me that works really well. Like when it comes to color, I'm not good at individual color discipline, but I am pretty good at color harmony. And so if you go back and you look at my pieces, there's a lot of that. There's very little of particular and disciplined color work, but there is a lot of work in finding and exploiting color harmonies. which is also why coloring in my paintings tend to be kind of samey a lot of the time. I just got 7 new sketchbooks and new fine liners. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm expecting to see some, sketchbook pages crammed full with goodness fairly soon. All right, so seeing as we're about an hour and a half in, so I'm gonna start adding some light to this. There we go. I like most of the new update Procreate, but the one thing I'm not crazy about is the way you've set up the layer moding. There's something very lovely about the old. I mean, maybe just because I'm used to it, but there was something very lovely about the old menu system. Please bring it back as an option. Alright, any tips on painting? I'm also kind of having trouble due to my being used to pencil sketching. Okay, I mean, yeah, it's hard to give you one thing, isn't it? Treat it as best as you can as sketching with extra steps, I guess. I mean, there's no one way of making the leap from one to the other. But what I will say is that oh wait, I'm gonna change this a little bit. What I will say is that the better you can be at clearly trying to use, like, if you think of them as tools and you're building a house or something, it's easier to think of all the different disciplines or tools rather than them being things you have to use. So when you're drawing just with pencil, you have full freedom within that medium. And so let's say you just have, if you want to take it step by step, start with just pencil and flat colors. What can you do with that? How far can you push that? And then start adding value. So just pencil and, like, as in terms of lines and flat colors, and then start adding elements in, light sources and stroke economy and elements upon elements upon elements until you reach the point where it feels more like a painting than a drawing, meaning that you deal more with planes and with light and color than you do with design by line. If that makes sense. I'm not sure how you sketch, though. If you already sketch in value, then that's useful for you. Gene, Gene. Gene Wolf. Yeah, there's something odd about that. For whatever reason, OBS only records on one channel. Or it's my new microphone. I'm not sure. We've been trying to set it up and get it sort of optimal. So I got a bunch of nice... well, the audio is better than it used to, suffice to say. But still working on getting it just right. So as you can see, as I'm putting in the shadows, I'm trying to stay quite... I'm using a fairly large brush. I'm trying to not get too specific. I'm just trying to lay in the large shapes so that I can get a feeling of the three-dimensionality, and then I'll go in and kind of clean it up. But I'm trying to not let myself get tempted into detail-y stuff before it is appropriate. Remind me of Forrest, legendary CSGO player. I can only take that as a compliment. I know a guy named Forrest. He doesn't look much like me, but he's a very nice guy. I don't think he's a professional CSGO player, though, so probably not the same person. I can... So since we're keeping it fairly clean and simple here, this is a time when using the selection tool is very useful. Because what I want to do is fairly specific and minimal marks. So painting against a hard outline is very useful. So I'll often go and just make a selection, and use a large brush to kind of make my brushstroke and try and make them as precise as possible. But also just simplicity will allow, or will force your eye to allow for more, what do you call it? Well, it'll allow you to fuck up a little more, and not get your eye all judgy for it, which is useful, especially when you're sketching, because you're just trying to get ideas down, not really going for the final render here. What's up, matey? Thanks, Laxwire. So again, we're running out of questions, people. Get on it. Joshua, yeah, I'm freelancing. Yeah, for the most part. Sometimes I do longer contract work, but for the absolute most part, I freelance. And may I just say, it's the best. Because it means I can work on like game projects, and then the next week I can be like, hey, Procreate, can I make an illustration for you? And they're like, yay, why not? And then I'm like, yay, and then I make something cool. I mean, it's not like that every day, but those are the good ones. Favorite things to listen to while drawing? That's a good one. So there's a bunch of podcasts I love. There is the History of Rome podcast and the Revolutions podcast, both by a guy called Mike Duncan. He's brilliant. I also like listening to The Bugle and Hello from the Magic Tavern. Apart from that, I have like music kicks sometimes. Like I'll find an artist and then listen to them until my ears are tired of them, and then I must leave them alone until I rediscover them like 4 years later. So right now I'm on a Billy Joel / Elton John kick, and I've been listening the hell out of like Piano Man and Vienna and all those kinds of goodies. So yeah, that's good. From time to time, if I find a TV series that's just right, meaning that I can watch it without having to pay attention much, I can have that running in the background. So usually either something that I've seen a million times, or something that's kind of schlocky. So Seinfeld, for example, is brilliant because it's a series about nothing, so I don't really have to pay attention, but it's fun and it's distracting the part of my brain that would otherwise get bored. Though I can only really do this when I'm in well settled work, so stuff that where most of the design challenge is done, and like most of the stuff that's mentally challenging is completed, and then I can kind of sit down and enjoy. Otherwise, I like Rain.com. I know there's another one too, but Rain.com is great, and it literally just has the sound of rain, which is fantastic. And also audiobooks. I do listen to a bunch of audiobooks and documentaries. I recently bought a a subscription for Curiosity Stream. Not a sponsor, but could be. And they are pretty great. I mean, there's a bunch of those out there now, Magellan TV and those kinds of things. But it's good. You feel like you get something extra out of your kind of entertainment. So I loved it. First time entering a Procreate live stream. Yeah, good. Come back. Did you ever think about brushwork, or are you more concerned about accuracy? I think I was. I mean, again, like I come from drawing and not from painting, so like brushwork has always been of secondary importance to me. But I see it in other artists, and I'm thoroughly fascinated by it in their work. So I want to be good at it. It's just it is one of those things that's a little bit anathema to the way that I work, which is kind of highly effectivized through like layering and stuff like that. So it is something that I'm testing out a little bit though, and kind of including into my final renderings and whatnot, but little by little. What do you think of people who have more than 100 layers in their artwork? They're trash. Anything more than 100, trash. No, of course not. Yeah, I mean, some people have different ways of layering. Some people, use a bunch of tools and layers and things. That's cool. I'm all for it. As long as they're used as tools. The moment things become crutches, then they are detrimental to the final result, is my experience. And that's when we should leave them alone and try a simpler solution. Do you think about okay. Favorite thing to listen to while crocheting? So if I wanted to freelance, how would that happen? Well, Joshua, you contact clients. I mean, essentially, it needs to be clear that when people are looking for freelancers to do work, you are one of those people. So contacting outsourcing studios, contacting game studios, having a portfolio, for example, on ArtStation that you constantly update and keep nice and shiny. And freelancing does kind of come down to the rat race, especially in the beginning. So you got to be willing to kind of jump in with both feet and put in the time to kind of build an online presence and get yourself into contact with these prospective clients. That's quite important. Once you've gotten there, then it's more of a question of getting sort of the clients that you want. But in terms of starting, yeah, you just got to start, kind of. You got to get your work out there. You got to get it in front of the people who you want to work with. And you got to be willing to take jobs that aren't optimal oftentimes, because they might lead to something. That doesn't mean you should be able to, or you should be willing to take like cut rate prices and stuff. But be aware that sometimes you got to do some grunt work, some less prestigious things. But this is also something that I would say is easier achieved through an outsourcing studio. Like if you can go and start working for an outsourcing studio, and then after you've sort of built yourself a little set of experience and pieces and so on, you can strike out on your own and try and find your own freelance clients. That was more or less the way I went about it after Volta, and it was all right. Okay. No. I mean, again, using however many layers you want to use is entirely up to you, or the strength of your hardware, I suppose, is a limiting factor. Yeah, I don't think that that's one particular limitation or one particular number of layers you should be measuring yourself by. That seems less than productive to me. Okay. I make a pretty good living wage. Yes, but it is a vocation as much as it is a job. It is something you do all the time. You never really get off work, as it were. Like, you do have times when you're not working, but you're still in the mindset. You're still there. It's still something that you check in on. It is more than just a job, is my point. But yes, I make very good money from doing this. A good sort of pricing strategy, or the pricing strategy I've been taught, is always ask for about 20% more than you think you deserve, because the prevailing wisdom is that you'll be offered about 20% less. So it goes up and up. All right, so a couple more moves then before we're done. So we got our basic shading in. Oh yeah, you use color harmony tools. I've been playing with that. That is fantastic. I gotta master it at some point, but I love the new tools. They're so delicious. Okay, so we're gonna clean up our lines a little bit first, and then we're gonna move on to kind of adding some final touches, because we're running out of time a little bit here, people. Alright, so on top of the multiply layer, I'm going to add a soft light layer. And then to try and squeeze some warmth into this, I'm going to use soft brush and select the multiply layer. That means I'm only going to be painting within the activated pixels on that layer. And I'm going to use this to establish my darkest darks. But I'm going to have to do... Wait, what's happening if I do this? Yeah, that's not good. Gonna leave that. But I will put this beneath the darken layer, I think. Is that gonna work? Yeah, it's gonna work. So I'm just trying to establish like some terminal shadows, and I want to use it to draw the eye into the areas of high contrast, which is going to be like up here in the face. The reason why I put the layer where I did was to try and get the working relationship between the darken layer and the multiply and the soft light to do what I wanted them to do, which is to try and erase the existing work lines as smoothly as possible. And I think this is gonna be the best way of doing that. Can you get a replay? Hell yeah. We can do that now before we go on. So for now, did a little background thing. Started establishing lines for the face. Did some noodling there. There we go. So you can get pretty far with some very basic tools here. what I want to do now. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing in the leaves a little. Get some nice shadow shapes in here. I'm also using this soft light layer as a bit of a value adjuster. So using a larger brush and just trying to get contrasts that's gonna pull a little more attention into the face without going too crazy with anything. Alright, so if I smudge here, that should have a nice effect. Yeah, okay. How to basic AQ. I don't know what that means. There's normal. There's normal. I just need to select this shadow color again. And get back here. How were you taught? You said you didn't have a degree. Oh, okay, suddenly we got a lot of questions. Besides art, what is a skill that you would like to master? Oh, good question. Having lived with someone who's an amazing cook, now, I would learn to, I would like to learn how to like improvise with food. Like Sunny is amazing with food, and she has made me realize what I'm like. As a Norwegian, you don't really come from the most spectacular food culture in the world, and it's made me realize that both by traveling with her and like experiencing some Persian food culture, I realized that I think I would have loved to come from a strong food culture. So mastering some more food making techniques would be fun. I think more languages would be cool. But maybe something like corresponds a little more to art. I mean, languages do, I suppose, but I think a better sense of rhythm, I would say. Better sense of the sort of more abstract elements in painting. I am not great at that, and it's one of those things that the more I see it in other people's work, the more it is something that fascinates me and something that I appreciate, and I would like to be able to do that myself. But it is a bit of a mystery to me, because it is one of those things that, in and of itself, I understand the basic idea of rhythm, but when it gets to something more than just being a tool, it does become something that's a little opaque to me, and I get easily sort of derailed by it. Will you upload the illustration you did for Procreate on ArtStation? It looks amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that is the plan. I was kind of just holding off till we've done the stream. But yeah, it's gonna go up there and on all the other sites as well. So you'll be seeing it online soon. It's funny with these growers. I realize that they are. I mean, the way I started designing them back in the day, uh, in terms of being an effective design, they are terrible. They are not effective. That means that it takes a lot of time to draw them because there's so many inconsistent little details that you have to do. But they are a lot of fun to draw. Suggest you all try. Alright, so let's have some fun with some highlights towards the end. I'm a big fan of the screen layer myself. I know there's a lot of different ways of doing these things, but I like the kind of matted result it gives. How was I taught? I didn't. You said you didn't have a degree. Yeah, so that's a good question. I went to art school after. Well, in Norway, you have the chance to kind of choose a little bit of your direction quite early on. So when I was 15, I was able to choose sort of art and craft as a specialization in high school, and this is also where I kind of discovered a lot of the things that have kind of driven me into this career path later on. But it was also the time when I met my best friend, and we've kind of been pushing each other down our respective art paths ever since. So I learned a lot from going to high school, and then after high school I went to a private art school in Oslo called Einar Granum, who's an old Norwegian master craftsman who started the School of the Arts and Craft. So I attended that for 2 years, and that was all right. It has become kind of one of those hippie enclave sort of places where you're given a studio space and some resources, and told to do your thing, which is actually a very good, I think, recipe for an art school to a point. And if you have people who are motivated to kind of teach themselves and learn things, then it can go really well. But it also means that people who are struggling a little more or trying to find like a direction are not really liable to receive that kind of effective support. So it's a fine school, but not the best. And then I went to University College Falmouth for a year before I got to go and join Volta. And I will say, like, serendipitously, I learned more once I got a job than leading up to it. Most of the stuff I learned before that was stuff I kind of taught myself. And then after that, I met people who were, in the industry and doing the things that I wanted to do. And from them, I learned a whole bunch. And a lot more of it having to do with sort of the esoteric elements in this industry than, like, particular craft. Craft, I'd gotten to a point where I could kind of teach myself that. But the things that I needed to learn was, like, not, how to not be an asshole and how to work well with others. I kind of spent the last 4 years before I got to Volta being the guy who was, who wanted to do this for real and didn't want to, like, fuck around and stuff. So I was pretty kind of high and mighty on myself by the time I got there, and having a bunch of professionals kind of break you down to size is a useful exercise for a young and budding artist. So I think that's some of the stuff that taught me the most. It's like how to be nice, how to work as a team, how to kill your own ego, that sort of thing. It's the kind of stuff you have to do. You gotta do it. Alright, so now we're getting somewhere. I also learned a ton from being on concept.org back in the day. and having the good fortune of sort of being able to hang out with other people who also just wanted to do art, you know. So I got quite lucky that I got to be there when it was the legendary place that it is now. Or, you know, it isn't anything now really, but what it was rumored to be, or however you want to say it. In India, people who have money open studios to earn more without no art back, and people call themselves artists who can't even draw a good line. Working here is ridiculous. What would you suggest? Well, if it's bad there, then there is, you know, if you can try and apply to, for example, Volta or an outsourcing studio, then they will usually pay for your relocation. So if the studio system in India is bad or solipsistic, then I would suggest try it somewhere else. You know, the industry is large and widespread, and while leaving home can be painful, it is sometimes necessary so that you can. I mean, you can never come back if you don't leave. And you know, it can take some time, but it feels good to come back home. All right, so I'm gonna do copy all and paste. I'm gonna do a couple of little nice moves before we're done here. So first things first, I'm gonna go over with another soft light layer, and the reason why I do like copy everything over to a new layer is at this point we're gonna get a little screwy with it. So I'm gonna want to do like large moves with smudging, stuff like that. So it's good to kind of separate it out and have it as one large layer that I can work with. It also feels good to kind of commit to something. As I said before, digital art is notoriously short on limits, so imposing some on yourself can be a good way of kind of setting a challenge and sticking with it. So right now I'm focusing on trying to just get the values to be as dramatic as is appropriate for this face. And so I want those values to pull the viewer into the center line of the face, and I'm going to try and use soft light to push back the backside of the face a little. Trying to use a little sort of washing technique to get that effect. Hey, Nikolai! So, to everybody who doesn't know, the guy who just posted in the chat, Nikolai Lockhartson, he is the man behind the Nico roll brush in Procreate. So, if you don't know, now you know, and you know the guy to approach for great brushes. He truly is a goddamn technical genius. So, salute you, sir. How to basic HU, just say this once. I have a $200 bet. Well, I guess you could cut it out of what I just said. Okay. He really is the best. I agree. Anyway. So we're kind of closing in on ending time, so can do a couple of last questions if anyone's got anything. Well, if you go work for an outsourcing studio, like in-house at an outsourcing studio, you'd technically not be freelancing at that point, or you could probably freelance on top of it, I guess. But I'm saying that in order to freelance, sometimes it takes a period of building the necessary skill set, and that is often more easily done in a studio environment. And it's good to get that experience too. Like see if being around people, if working in a studio might actually be something you want. I know for me, like I had a lot of anxiety before I went to Volta about the idea of working freelance, because I was scared that like working alone would separate me out from the crowd, and I would be less likely kind of to meet people and have that kind of part of the artist experience. And so after being at Volta, I had more kind of confidence in my ability and willingness to work alone. Not that I didn't like the people I work with. That's not what I'm trying to say. It was clear to me that I like to be able to choose. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think. Okay, guys. I think that brings us about to the end of today. I'm gonna smudge out and clean up a little bit, but for the most part, I think we are nearing completion. So, if you guys have any more questions or comments or anything, now's the time to get it into the people's showers. Yeah, any more questions or whatever, this would be a good time to get them in. And in the meantime, I can say that if you are keen on more of this kind of stuff, then the Twitch stream is on every couple of days. It is a good time and good people and pretty fun assignments. So if you want to join in, that would be awesome. Next live stream on the Twitch will be tomorrow, I believe. No, wait, tomorrow is New Year's Day, so it will be New Year's Eve. I mean, it's will be on New Year's Day, I think, noon time. So that's the same time that this stream started. All right. The next stream, just that hasn't, is gonna be on New Year's Day at about noon. It's hard to say, dude. How much? The question was, how much do you get paid for concept art like this? Depends very much on the client and the job and the nature of the concept. Like, this is just an illustration I pulled out of my ass. So, this would usually constitute, if I'm take this to full render, this could take, upwards of a day of work. So usually I work off of a day rate. So it would, I would schedule that as a day of work if I was to take this to absolute completion. So I could work this one for another 6 hours to get it to a point where a client would be okay with it, and usually a few hours would have to be spent in revisions because they would want a different kind of nose or a different kind of ear or something. So alright, a little touch of the old color dodge at the end just to bring out some glow. Oops, around the eye, for example, is nice. Not too much, just a touch. There we go. Why can I show my iPad screen on OBS? I'm not sure, Lawrence. I'm using a program called a Power Mirror to do it. And by that I stream my iPad to my laptop, and then I'm streaming onto Twitch from the laptop. But okay, I believe that's about it, guys. Hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope y'all will go out and get Procreate because it is great. And also, I hope you'll come and join us at the stream on New Year's Day at noon. Other than that, I can just say thank you for joining us and sticking it out. Thank you for all the questions. It was real fun. And yeah, hope to see you guys soon. And thank you to Procreate for giving me the chance to do the stream. It was a lot of fun, and hope you'll have me back soon. So bye everybody. I will see you all later. Cheers.